From finally reverting to a grittier setting to introducing an entirely new class, Diablo 4 looks set to be a return to form for the franchise, and we won't have to wait much longer to get our hands on it either. After all, the game's open beta is right around the corner. Blizzard has announced that it's going to give its players an early hands-on period, to get to grips with the game's mechanics and get a feel for it before it actually launches on June 6th later this year. That said, they're still doing the classic EA and Activision thing of dividing the beta into two stages, so you've essentially got two separate weekends in March for it, with the first one being an early access period, and the second one being the actual beta. The exclusive access beta runs from Saturday the 18th until Monday the 20th of March, while the open beta runs from the 24th of March until the 27th. This may not seem like a lot of time for a game like Diablo, because with an RPG like this, you gotta grind, right? Then again, that's not the intention when it comes to these things. Instead, all Blizzard will be focusing on is stuff like item balancing, loot drop rates, and of course, server stability. With a greater focus on the multiplayer aspect of things now, you need to have robust servers, though they're probably fine in that department as well, cause this is their forte and they know how to nail that seamless MMO experience. Obviously, the whole dividing the beta into two weekends is a frustrating thing for the fanbase, since it separates the player base and leaves people behind. But hey, at least we're getting to play the game, right? Now you're probably wondering, how do I get my hands on this? And well, if you've already pre-ordered the game, then congrats, cause you're already in. Yep, the pre-order also gets you access to both the early access and open beta weekends. Though if you're still not sure if you want to buy the game before its release, then you'll have to look for codes online, at least for the early access anyway. The open beta, thankfully, is available for everyone, so you can hop in with your friends. Now, obviously, Blizzard's been handing out early access codes to influencers and all that. Plus, there have been a bunch of giveaways as well, but somehow, we also got the weirdest collab out of this whole thing.
Rasma. But I would have saved your place. Just the same. And now, all that you might have been.
Guess what? Blizzard has actually partnered with KFC to give away beta codes. Oh, and it gets better, because if you're in the US and you buy the Double Down, you get early access. I mean, don't even get me started on the promo image they shared. It was literally Lilith standing there looking menacing as always, and holding the KFC Double Down, with the caption, "Double down on your worship." Genius. I don't blame her though, because that stuff is kinda mouthwatering. Also, of course, the whole thing will be available to play on Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. So no matter what platform you've got, you're sorted. They're not shying away from adding substantial content into the beta either. In fact, players can get through the entirety of Act 1 over the weekend. Yep, Blizzard is packing a whole bunch of stuff for us to play. Now, it's not exactly simple, since they're dividing some stuff between early access and the open beta, but essentially, everyone will have access to the prologue and the Act 1 story, including a world boss. Yeah, no more of that dropping into a random point in the game. We'll know exactly what's going on in this world. Not to mention, since this is a bit of an open world game now, players will get to fully explore the first zone, Fractured Peaks. That includes all the dungeons, side quests, and of course, a ton of loot. Oh, and you know the best part? You can play through it in couch co-op with someone who doesn't even have beta access. Or 4-player online co-op is also an option if your friends also have the game. As a matter of fact, Blizzard's encouraging people to play the game with their friends because you actually get bonus XP for killing enemies in co-op.
Must be hidden here somewhere. Read this.
But I know what you actually want to know. Just how many levels can you grind in the beta period? I mean, that's what Diablo players do, right? And well, there's a cap at level 25, which seems good enough. Besides, if you're still clamoring for more after you've reached it, you could always go back and start another run. After all, there are multiple classes available in the beta period. In fact, while early access only has Barbarian, Rogue, and Sorcerer, the open beta actually adds Druid and the new class Necromancer into the mix. Now, if you've played Diablo before, you know the drill. Barbarian is your default warrior for big melee and AoE damage, while Rogue is like an agile glass cannon. Plus, you've got the Druid who can transform into a bear and all that cool stuff, and the classic Sorcerer with spell-based damage. What we haven't seen in a mainline Diablo game before, however, is the Necromancer. The character debuted during an Xbox showcase last year, and it's exactly what the name suggests. You can summon undead minions and let them overwhelm your enemies. In fact, despite being a new addition, this is arguably the class to go for if you want to play solo. If I'm being honest, this beta is shaping up to be a pretty big moment for the franchise. Oh, and Blizzard can't afford to miss either, because we're long overdue for a good Diablo game. I mean, as a series, Diablo has seen its fair share of ups and downs, especially recently. We all know the drama behind Diablo Immortal, right? The whole "do you guys not have phones?" and the microtransaction disaster that followed. Not to mention, Diablo 3 didn't exactly launch in the best of conditions. It was just way too colorful and quote-unquote modern. Like, sure, it was a good game even back then, but it failed to build upon the success of Diablo 2. Now, thankfully, it didn't take long for the devs to push out updates over the game's lifecycle. And honestly, Diablo 3 is really good now, especially on console, which is definitely not something anyone could have imagined saying a decade ago. Of course, Blizzard improving that game doesn't automatically mean that Diablo 4 is also gonna be good, but everything does point toward it being an absolute banger of a game. Just take Blizzard's overall direction for example. The last time we got a mainline Diablo game was back in 2012, so they've certainly had plenty of time to come up with fresh ideas. Plus, even though people don't like Immortal for its monetization, it's still a fantastic game in terms of gameplay and design. I mean, at the end of the day, we just have to admit that it's a mobile game, and this is what works on those platforms. Besides, Blizzard's also trying to be a bit more introspective and correct its mistakes. They want to return to their glory days, and we've seen glimpses of that in other franchises too. World of Warcraft, for example, has had a recent resurgence after a period of mediocrity. Also, in spite of all the criticisms it's getting, Overwatch 2 is still a really solid game. Oh, and then there's the whole Microsoft deal, which, if it goes through, will probably help them stabilize as well. So for all intents and purposes, fans should be excited for Diablo 4. And even if they're not, this beta should be an indication of what's to come. And from everything we've seen so far, yeah, Diablo is back. And that, folks, is all we know about the upcoming beta release for Diablo 4.